Hey, welcome. Please make sure to join, also like and share the video. Joshua helped his dad unpack a delivery to their home. It sat in a spare room of the house. It looks like a tube or a futuristic coffin, said Josh. Don't let the look scare you, son. I spend my days in the one similar to it in the other room next to your mom's pod, as you know. It seemed a little weird at first until you started interfacing with the sensors and saw how your thoughts of lifting your arm controlled your digital twin. You should be excited to try it out, said Dad. I know. I am, I guess, seeming a little squeamish about getting in it. What if someone is claustrophobic? Dad came back quickly. Not a problem. Your mother was a little anxious at first. The pod senses when a user experiences anxiety and modulates a tone that the user does not hear that relaxes them. It's all baked into the system. They set it up and connected power. There was a note. It said there was no configuration necessary unless it failed to work. It would self-connect to the home networks and find its way to its server. Children starting in 7th grade found themselves in a learning environment that was completely new. It was virtual. Kindergarten through grade 6 has the children learn in the analog world of the physical, where they got to have some playtime among other children along with school. Kind of like a litter of puppies or kittens that learned much through experimentation and contact with others in the litter. It could be quite a shock for some when they later got into a pod at home where their bodies spent the whole school day completely immersed in the virtual. All they see, hear, and touch is not real but seems as if it was by being hooked up to a myriad of electronic sensors contained. There was a watery feeling pod liner and a hooded visual experience. They see the 3 dimensions of the classroom and interact with the teacher as well as the other students. To them it feels as if they are truly in a physical room. This is a newer version than my pod. I hope they worked any bugs out of it. Why don't you get in and see how it feels? There is a test program where you and the pod get to know each other. You attempt to move while it talks to you and helps explain. He got bored a lot last year in class, and that was with real kids. Imagine how it will be with this virtual classroom. I don't think there will be much excitement, so I'm hoping it has a lot of problems. That will ensure no boredom. Josh crawled into what seemed like a coffin. Okay, now what? He went into a prone position, and it felt like a giant warm water bladder filled in all the airspace between him and the pod. It felt good. First on the having software problems, be careful what you wish for. Now press this button. He pointed to a large green button. The top half will close. The system will train you on simple use and how to exit the program. I will be here, and I will enable voice communication so I can monitor and get you out if needed. You won't hear anything out here. It is completely soundproof. Josh pressed the button apprehensively. The large upper half groaned as if it was a heavy motor drive. As the top came down, he could see a kind of half a hood, like a welder's mask, covering his frontal vision, which connected and sealed to a lower similar construction, giving him the ability to see beyond each side periphery as he moved his head back and forth. The upper lid formed to his body like the lower with the warm bladder. He was completely immersed in it. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he reopened them, he found himself sitting on a stool in a room that was so bright white that it was hard to tell how far the walls were away from him. It both seemed close and infinite at the same time. The walls and ceiling were the same bright white. The corner seams between them were not well defined. Josh looked around the white room. He moved his head to look side to side, and it all seemed normal. A woman's soothing voice interrupted his thoughts. Can I help you train on the pod usage? Feeling at ease, Josh replied, Hello, yes, my name is Joshua, and I am a first-time user. Okay, Joshua. First have a look at your left wrist, and you will see a band with a button. Do you see it? Yes, I do. Her soothing voice sent a chill along his spine. The voice said, This is your quit and exit button to terminate the session. Press this button, and your pod will open its lid, releasing the pressure from the water bladder. You can then exit the pod. Josh looked at the wristband. Got it. Her voice sounded as if she were an authentic expert on usage. That definitely made it a pleasant experience. The voice continued, Now start to move your appendages one at a time. Right arm, left arm, etc. Your arms in the pod will not actually move because the bladder pushes back against them but senses your desired position. It takes a little getting used to. Josh tried to raise his right arm. It didn't actually feel like it moved due to the bladder pushing back. His arm went up in his view, though, and when he stopped trying to move it, it stopped. There was a little overshoot before it stopped. "Cool," he said. The voice added, "The movements will become more seamless to you as you practice. Now attempt to get up off the chair." Josh did so and clumsily stood up. He felt like a newly birthed horse standing for the first time. At least that is what he saw, which contributed to what he felt. He smiled broadly, finding the experience exceptional. He took a step, feeling shaky, but what worry, it wasn't like he could fall down. He was in the pod. He marched around the room, finding it fun, and he headed toward one of the walls. He never got any closer to what appeared to be the room wall, like he was on a treadmill. He ran fast but still never gained any on the distance. He turned toward another of the walls and had the same effect. He looked back where he expected the stool to be, and it was far away. This confused him. The voice concluded, "You are doing well, Joshua. Spend some more time adjusting to your digital twin. Jump, run, dance, or whatever pleases you. When you have enough, you can exit the program with the button on your wrist." He heard his dad's voice out of nowhere say, "Can you hear me? I'm here to Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm okay with being in here, so you can leave if you want. If I don't come out in an hour or so, you can check on me." "Okay, son, have fun." He picked up the packing material to put out in the trash and left the room. Josh continued for an hour, then tested the eject button. The room disappeared, and all went dark, and the lid cranked slowly open with a grunt. He sat up and got out. "Phew, interesting," he said to himself. The next morning at breakfast, Josh sat down with his mom and dad at the table where there was a breakfast plate steaming with hot food in front of him. He started in on it. Dad asked, "So today you start your first 7th grade class. Are you excited now that you have tried it?" "I guess. I like the pod. It would be great if there were games. Are there any?" Mom almost choked on her food. "I don't think so on that model. Why don't you ask your teacher inside the classroom?" "He said he hopes the pod has software bugs," Dad chuckled. "Trust me, Josh, you don't want software problems at your school," said Mom. Dad got up from the table. "I have an important meeting. We are going over the annual financial reports. See you two later." He looked at Roberta. "Are you working this morning?" "No, I want to sit in until Josh seems okay in class, and then I have some things to do before clocking in around lunch. See you tonight." George bent over and gave her a kiss on the cheek, pointed at Josh and said, "Good luck, son," and went to his work pod. "You don't mind if I monitor, do you? You have to allow it when we select the class program. It's for privacy." "No, I don't mind. I used to go get ready for school, but I guess I am always ready now. I am beginning to see some benefits already to this system." He got up and went to the room his pod was in. It was kind of empty otherwise, with some boxes stacked up on the far side from the entrance next to a window with a lovely view of their garden. Mom entered behind him. "Let's select a school. There are only a couple of programs available. I guess the one labeled 7th grade class is it?" And she selected it. The upper clam shell rumbled open, and Josh got in. He pushed the button to start, and the lid closed while the bladder pressed all around him above and below while all the light was sealed out. He did feel anxious for a moment in the darkness, but was relieved when the darkness ended and the vision activated. He was in the white room again, and the voice said to him, "Josh, you can decide if you want to change your appearance every day as far as clothes or select the standard school uniform. It is by far the most popular. The other choices allow you to pick every day or allow a random clothing assortment." "I'll take the school uniform. That solves my problem of picking something to wear." "Okay. The system will scan your face and body now. It will use that data to image your digital twin in the virtual class. If you ever want to change any of these settings, just ask for help when the door clamps shut. Enjoy your first day, Joshua." "Thanks." All went dark for a second, and then the class appeared. He looked around at a half-seated room to see if he recognized anyone from last year. He saw a lot of strange faces and thought of the dread of learning a new group of classmates. There in the front was Molly. He knew her and couldn't miss her bright red hair. When he got to his far right, he saw seated next to him was Yancey. Oh great, he thought. He liked his taller, heavier, freckled-faced friend. Hey buddy, Yancey said to him. Yancey, good to see you here. They did a fist bump, and it seemed to work just like a real fist bump. They both laughed. More students started popping into view as the room filled in. A girl appeared in front of Josh. It was Sherry. She was thin with light, shoulder-length brown hair and green eyes. Pete popped in just next to her on her left. He was thin with short black hair and brown eyes, was well-dressed, and appeared athletic but wasn't. Pete turned and greeted her, and they looked around the room, eventually seeing Josh and Yancey behind them. Sherry smiled and said, Josh and Yancey, now the class is complete. Pete said in a negative tone, I thought this virtual stuff was supposed to have higher standards. Guess not. He looked at Sherry grinning. Yancey looked at Josh and shrugged it off. Josh looked at the two of them and felt like Sherry mostly put up with Pete more than liked him. At least that was what he hoped. Pete thought he was the cool kid. Josh guessed many of the students saw him that way with his continuous talking back to teachers in a non-aggressive way. He referred to it as verbal jousting. Josh figured he was a little above average looking when it came to his height, build, short brown hair, and blue eyes. The room filled in most seats with students. The teacher had been sitting quietly, staring at her computer screen. She was average height and build for a middle-aged teacher with curly brown shoulder-length hair. Then she stood and said, All right, class. Good morning. My name is Miss Erzbruch. She spoke with a hint of a German accent, barely noticeable but there. Welcome to virtual learning. I hope you will find this experience to be both exciting and beneficial. I have your assigned seating in front of me. If anyone would like to sit somewhere else, let me know. I want to do it right away to make it easier for other students to get to know you. Also in this class, I will allow for you to change your appearance and voice digitally in our environment. If you want to change your hair color or sex or whatever it is that you like, you can do it now by loading this at home to your pod, and I will make it permanent. I want you to be comfortable here so your appearance can be like what you picked out to wear from your closet. It will be permanent for the year. It is important not to confuse your fellow classmates. I will teach your entire curriculum here. We use many software applications to assist in teaching, so I can do it all. So you will be seeing a lot of me from now on. Are there any questions before we get started? Pete, deciding to show off his sarcasm to the class right away, said, I wonder if it would be okay if I changed my look to my twin brothers, who I call Repeat? Miss Erzbruch replied, Well, why would you like to do that? I mean, it's okay if that is what you need to be comfortable, but doesn't he look just like you? Well, he is good looking like me, but he has a mole on his… Well, never mind. He looked around the room, nodding his head up and down while smiling, and got some laughter. Josh, Sherry, and Yancey did find it funny and joined in the laughter. Miss Erzbruch said, I see we have a comedian already. That did not take long. Okay, let's begin then. She started in on algebra and made her computer screen seen on the front wall of the room. You can also view this on your desk. It is a display and can show whatever I am showing up here. She points at the front wall. Also, you can save snapshots if you like of the screen, and they will be available to view there again if you want, both here at school and on your home computer, so that you can prepare yourself for testing. Sometimes your desk display will be disabled for testing. I will tell you before. Josh's mom felt everything was going well in the class, so she left the room and decided to check back before starting her job later. A couple of hours went by, and the teacher was talking about reality and the virtual world they were getting accustomed to when Yancey leaned over and commented to Josh, This is cool. I don't get uncomfortable sitting in this chair because I am not really sitting in this chair. I know, replied Josh. He did struggle with something in this new environment, though. In his analog classroom, whenever the material sounded like something he knew or was boring, he would look out the window and daydream about being out there. He loved being outside in the sunshine. There were no windows in this class. It had similar walls to the training program he was in. The outside view would give a dreamy, creative spark to his day. Something about being in here seemed like being in a prison. He mentioned it to Yancey in a low voice. Miss Erzbruch asked, Is there something you would like to share with the class, Joshua? Josh couldn't believe she heard him. Pete jumped in. That's right, he was just wondering if you were real or imaginary. Miss Erzbrook was caught off guard by Pete. That is quite a question, Peter, but it is not what Joshua was saying. Joshua, will you share now? Josh, amazed that she seemed to know what he was saying, said, well, I was just wondering why there are no windows in here. You know, to see nature and clouds in the sky. They are a distraction for grade school students. You are not in grade school anymore. You can remain focused on your education this way. Pete tried to continue interrupting class. What about it, teach? Are you real or virtual? Miss Erzbrook tried to brush off. Well, I am as real as any of you are in this room. Pete pressed her. What about outside this room? She seemed to be uneasy directly answering his question, but ended with somewhat of a riddle. I would say to you, all of you are too, and maybe I am too. Pete turned and looked at Sherry, Josh, and Yancey with a frown. Had he met his match? This would require more thought before he blurted anything else out. She said, I think you will know yourself in time. I think maybe we should get on with class now. She went on throughout the day, subject by subject, one after another, never going back or confusing which subject she was on at the moment. Josh stared at a blank wall and imagined there was a window with a view of a tree-lined brook. He smiled, problem solved. The sun was shining bright and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. The teacher spoke in a monotone voice where she occasionally raised her volume to reel daydreaming students back to the subject. He enjoyed solving problems. It was soon mid-afternoon and the day was nearly complete when she said, that is all for today, class. Homework will be posted to your home routers, and you can connect with your computer or go back into the pod and work on it. See you all tomorrow. Josh watched as seats became empty all around him as students pressed their exit buttons immediately like it was a race to see who could get out of there first. Sherry turned and asked, how did she hear what you said to Yancey? I didn't hear it, and I am right in front of you. Pete said, maybe because your ears were facing forward and hers were facing Josh, or maybe she is a robot with bionic ears. He lifted his wrist to exit. She tried to ask Pete, did you hear what he said? But before she could finish, his chair was empty. I guess I will see you guys tomorrow, she said, looking at Josh and Yancey. Her chair became empty. Josh said to Yancey, later, buddy. Yancey sat alone. See ya. He stayed for a moment. He didn't really have any reason to get back quickly, so he kind of took in the summation of the day from memory and then pressed exit on his wristband. The room was empty except for the teacher, and she had a devilish grin on her face. The upper shell of Josh's pod creaked open, and he climbed out of his casket. He went down to his kitchen for a snack. He realized he had no lunch but hadn't gotten hungry all day until he got out of his pod. It was a weird feeling. Dad was done with work early and sat at the table. How was your first day, son? Good, I've got homework, he said and grabbed a glass of milk and a handful of cookies and went to his room. His dad was left wanting more details. Josh couldn't help thinking about how nervous he was about using this device just one day ago, and now he was ready to climb into the pod for a day at school. The lid closed and the warm bladder pushed up against his body. It was like slipping into a warm bath on a cold winter day to lose the chill. There was momentary darkness, and then he found himself sitting in class with his friends. Good morning, guys, he said. Yancey was busy trying to finish his homework before class started. Pete was thinking higher thoughts, amazing himself. Sherry replied to him smiling, hello, Josh. Did you finish your homework? Yeah, it wasn't too bad. Pete chimed in, homework, shomwork. Yancey was surprised by Pete's answer and said, how did you get all this done in one night? He was a bright kid in many ways, but also a procrastinator. He often was late on assignments. By setting priorities, my friend. Pete exuded confidence. Sherry joined in, did you finish? She looked at Pete in disbelief. Of course not. That stuff wasn't among my priorities, he laughed. Good morning, class. I hope you all were successful with your work. The teacher got the attention of her class. There were some affirmative replies and some groans as well. We will discuss it later after we cover some new material. She displayed a page from her syllabus on the front wall and discussed what they would be doing in the next several weeks. While she was talking, she abruptly stopped in the middle of the sentence. She stood frozen like a statue. At first, the kids looked around at each other as if to say, "What is going on?" Panic struck some of them. Pete laughed. "I guess we know now, since we are still moving and she is not, who is real and who is imaginary here." He snickered, not at all concerned. He assumed it was a glitch that would be corrected pretty quickly. Sherry turned to Josh and Yancey, not caring for Pete's sarcasm. "What do you think happened? There must be someone monitoring, don't you think?" "I'm afraid not," said Yancey. "These programs are designed not to be interfered with. They stand on their own with typically no input once released." "How do you know that?" Josh asked. "My dad works in the virtual applications programming field. He often has meetings in his study, and I listen in through the heating ductwork. It is pretty interesting at times." Pete walked up to the front and made faces at the teacher directly in front of her but didn't get any laughs this time. He looked at the class and said, "Don't tell me that this worries you?" The class was mostly silent. "He says artificial intelligence is good at writing software code fast, but sometimes it fails at including key ingredients that are needed for some applications," Yancey continued. Sherry asked, "What kind of ingredients?" "He says human emotion and that creative spark that people enjoy. In AI there is no joy or creative spark, just trying every possibility. They have speed in their favor. The infinite monkeys theory." "Infinite monkey theorem. What?" Josh questioned. "My dad told me about it. It says an infinite number of monkeys hitting typewriter keys randomly could, by chance, eventually type a Shakespeare play? It is highly improbable but mathematically possible. The improbability is where AI sometimes fails. It cannot make the leap that creativity makes. So there are still human software coders to fill in these gaps. These AI programs are either bad or simply don't completely do what is intended. So they can end in a box canyon with no way out." He refers to these as the program name followed by "not," meaning it does not work. His job is to creatively write a program that does what is needed to replace the bad file. Kind of like splicing the program in the right place with additional code. Josh thought for a minute and then said, "So you are saying we are stuck here in classroom not?" "Yes and no. I don't know if we are stuck. We can just exit out of here." Josh asked, "What is his job title? It sounds interesting." "I don't know his job title exactly, but he refers to himself as a code tinker." The class sat worried for an hour, but nothing changed. Pete stood up frustrated. "That's it, I've had enough for one day," and he pressed his exit button with everyone watching. Nothing happened. "Hey, this isn't working." His demeanor suddenly became less cocky, and he showed the kind of concern on his face that the students who knew him had never seen before as he kept pressing the button harder and harder. Molly giggled a little. "Maybe you are not pressing it hard enough, Pete." Sherry and Yancey grinned at her sarcastic remark. Josh was still thinking about windows when he asked them, "Isn't it peculiar that we have no windows in this class but we have a door?" They turned and looked at the door at the back of the room they hadn't noticed before. Pete had returned to his seat, listening in. Maybe Miss Erzbruch is purely virtual and she comes through the door. Sherry, annoyed by Pete's comment, "Would you stop goofing around and focus on this problem with us?" Yancey thought for a moment and said, "Wait a minute. He might be on to something." Pete stood and took a bow, showing that he was partially recovered from letting his concern show for a minute. Josh walked to the door, which was solid. He grabbed the handle and wiggled it. "It's locked. Darn." Sherry joined him and took notice that when he was holding the doorknob, a glass window appeared on the top portion of the door and disappeared when he released it. "Look," she said, grabbing it. "I can see into a hallway." Josh looked through the glass as well. Yancey joined them while Pete went to the teacher's computer in the front with a hunch. Yancey said, "Programmers leave back doors in their code so they can get into work on it, avoiding all the usual security. My dad showed me how to do it on our home server router. I wonder if there is some way to override the lock." He looked around the edges of the door for a switch. Suddenly a buzzer sounded, followed by a snap, and the door cracked open. Yancey was wondering what he did to unlock the door until Pete cracked up laughing loudly. "Who needs passwords when you have Pete?" They all looked at him. "There is a door unlock soft button on her computer display. I pressed it and the door unlocked." He was so proud of himself. The class looked on in wonder, with several kids getting up and going to the door. Josh stepped through the doorway, and Sherry and Yancey followed while the rest stayed in the room but poked their heads out one by one to have a look at what was out there. Pete went through the doorway and joined the group in the hall. They looked up and down the passage, and it seemed to go on forever in both directions with many doors on either side. There was a door directly opposite from the room. Yancey jiggled the handle. It was locked. Molly was browsing their onboarding schedule and came across a note. She came to the hall to tell them about it. It says we should never try to go through the door. There was danger if we did. It was locked for that reason. When the other kids heard that, they returned to their seats. Pete said, "It doesn't look dangerous to me." He closed the door and tried to open it again. He shook the handle. Darn, it's locked again. While holding the handle, he could see through the temporary window into the class. He began to look like he was losing his cockiness again as things took a turn for the worse. Molly banged on the window and looked through as well and said, "I can't get their attention," panicking slightly. Josh took a look and said, "That's strange. They are not moving." Sherry joined him and looked. "What? Let me see." "You're right. They seem frozen." "Yeah, like the teacher." Josh turned and looked directly face to face with her. She looked freaked out about what they were seeing. "Stay calm, we can't lose our heads. It is probably just some kind of glitch. They will work it out soon, I'm sure." He noticed every time one of the kids started to panic, they returned to normal pretty quickly without any resolution to their problem. He remembered his dad telling them that the pod system monitored their vitals and would release a soothing sound modulated into their thoughts that would calm them when needed. "I know, but I want to get out of here. We should all try our exit buttons. If one person gets out of their pod, they can alert someone as to what is going on and help the rest." Pete was the only one that tried his exit button so far, so Sherry raised her wrist and looked at the button. She looked back at Josh. "Here goes." She pressed it. Nothing happened. Then she seemed to calm down. Yancey went next. He raised his arm and pressed his button but had no result either. Molly and Josh simultaneously pressed their exit buttons with the same negative results. Molly said, "If we ever get back inside the classroom, we can ask the rest to try as well if they haven't already. What about the note to not go through the door into the hall for any reason? If it was something small like a glitch, we may have amplified the results by being out here." Pete laughed. "Out? How are we out?" "No, we are in. In the virtual world. Those in the classroom, also virtual world." Yancey was getting annoyed. "Would you quit flipping between joking and being serious like that? This is serious." Pete replied, "Oh, that was joking. Sorry if I upset any of you girls." He gave Yancey a wide-eyed look like, "Do you get it? Just knock the whole thing off, okay?" He stood torso to torso with Pete but was 3 inches taller. Pete shrugged sheepishly and backed away. Yancey rarely acted that way. It might have been his way of showing anxiety. Josh looked up and down the hallway. He wondered if any of the doors would lead them to a way out of this. Sherry was watching him while he brainstormed. "What are you thinking?" "I say we make 2 teams and search these doors for one that is unlocked." Molly wasn't sure about the idea. "You want us to leave this safe place for a questionable outcome in another room?" Sherry agreed with Josh. "I don't feel safe here at the moment." Josh let out his plan. "Sherry and I will try this direction. Yancey, you and Pete go the other way. Molly, since you feel safe here, stay and guard this door. There are no markings, so we don't want to lose our way back into the room." They all nodded and started on their mission. "Don't open any door until we discuss the next step as a team. Just jiggle and see if the handle is locked," said Yancey. Josh and Sherry nodded and went to the first set of opposite-facing doors along their path. Both were locked. They went to the next, and the next, and the next until they were nearly out of sight from where Molly stood guarding their classroom entry point. The door was still locked. She checked it several times. Yancey and Pete were experiencing similar failures. Both teams continued. Molly kept changing her view back and forth to keep the groups in sight until she could no longer see them clearly. The next door handle that Josh tried on his right side wiggled like it was unlocked. "Hey, I've got one." He looked at Sherry's excited face. "Should I open it?" Sherry questioned. What about what we said about getting everyone here before doing it? I can't even see Molly, can you? Josh said. No, if we go for them, we might never find this door again. Then he turned the handle slowly as Sherry gasped cautiously. Wait, what if only one of us goes for her? She said. Then what? She can't leave, or we might lose our classroom mark. So then you would have to go alone for Yancey and Pete, who I'm sure are out of Molly's sight if they haven't found an open door. Then 3 of us would be alone, out of sight. That is too risky. We must fly by the seat of our pants and explore by ourselves. You can remain outside if you want, but I'm going in, he said. He opened the door slowly. Wait, what if the door locks after you are through? Good point. Hold the door open and keep your eyes on me. She nodded back, looking uneasy. They both looked through before he entered. What they both saw was beautiful and amazing.